It's Rachel. I'm back with a quick one on seed saving. I've seen a couple of videos lately that popped up in my suggested feed where people were talking about saving seeds either from their gardens or from the grocery store, and they made it sound a little simpler than it really is. I am a huge fan of seed saving. I do it all the time. I have a big collection of my seeds downstairs. The main reason I do it, you can get seeds that are well adapted to your specific climate, and you can select for traits that matter to you. And I wanted to quickly flag some of the things you have to be careful of and how I personally try and help prevent problems, get a good outcome. If you saw my prior videos on the set it and forget it bed here, buried at the way lonesome back end of our property, you'll remember one of the reasons I was excited that I did it is that I inadvertently discovered two very cold hardy arugula plants, which has turned into this monster. It's living its best reproductive life. And then the other was a spinach plant that you can kind of see back in here. Those both overwintered beautifully, much better than I expected, and I intentionally am allowing them to set seed. I would like to save that and keep it for cold hardy greens. Now, the one problem with saving seeds from your garden is cross-pollination. Just planting open pollinated varieties is not enough. If two plants are in the same species, they will cross-pollinate one another. And when that happens, you might not get what you want. So let me show you this back bed with the spinach and the arugula plant that I want to keep, and let me talk through how I am preventing cross-pollination that I don't want to have happen so that I can keep those genetics of just the ones that I want to save. I separately planted a row of spinach, you can kind of see it here, next to that one that had overwintered. I came in the spring and planted a regular spring sowing of spinach. That is now also beginning to set seed, and I don't want the genetics to cross because my goal was to save just the cold hardy. I'm gonna yank all of that out. Similarly, I had put in a row of arugula in the spring, in addition to this guy that had overwintered, and that's starting to set flowers. You can see a few of them here. I don't want to cross-pollinate. I wanna keep only the cold hardy genetics. I'm gonna go through today and remove all of that as well. The different plants that you can save seeds from, sort of starting from the easiest and going to what I think are the hardest. The easiest tend to be your cucurbit family, your squashes. The reason is that summer squash like zucchini, a winter squash like a butternut, and your cucumbers, your cantaloupes, and your watermelons are all different species. They are in the Cucurbitaceae family, but each of those is its own distinct subspecies. That means they won't cross each other. The other good news for home gardeners is most of us don't need more than one cucumber plant, and we don't need more than one zucchini plant. These things are prolific producers. You really can get away with just one plant, and that means you don't have to worry about, say, having two types of zucchini cross-pollinate or two types of cucumber cross-pollinate. The only concern you have to manage there is letting those fruits sit on the plant and go all the way to full maturity usually will reduce the production of the plant. So the only watch out for melons is wait until the late tail end of the season, one of your last ones on the plant, let it go all the way to maturity, save the seeds from just that one, and understand that when you do that, you're going to really stop the production on the rest of the plant. The second easiest, in my opinion, are tomatoes. There are 7,000 varieties, I think, of tomatoes, or more than that. Believe it or not, they are all the same species. It is, I think, Solanum lycopersicum. They will cross-pollinate. A cherry tomato will cross-pollinate a big slicer tomato. A paste tomato will do the same. It is the same species, and they will cross-pollinate. Now, the good news for a tomato is they have what are called perfect flowers. They have the female and the male parts all together in one flower. And if you do what I do, which is as I am pruning, I will go through and kind of gently flick the stem, kind of like you're tickling a baby under the chin. The vibration of that mimics a bee, and it vibrates the pollen inside the flower, and it will self-pollinate. I generally have had good success with my tomatoes just pollinating themselves, and I haven't had a ton of cross-pollination. That said, if you want to be even extra careful, I would say plant all of your paste types in roughly the same place in the garden, your cherry types in another place. And if you're going to grow any big slicer heirloom types as well, plant those together in one spot. The main goal is to make sure that if they did cross-pollinate, you would still get something you probably like. Two cherry types cross-pollinating, you'll still get a cherry type. I had a accidental tomato experiment about 3 years ago where some fruit off of my kind of tunnel of tomatoes that I used to grow, that tunnel had 5 or 6 different kinds of tomatoes all growing up over it. They definitely cross-pollinated. I hadn't planned on saving seed from them, but one year a random rogue tomato either fell off, or a bird or a squirrel partly ate it and excreted it. Somehow, some way, a little volunteer baby tomato came up in my wood chips outside of the garden bed. The tomatoes weren't super awesome. It was kind of a weird, like 1.5-inch diameter, sort of saladette style tomato. They tasted good, not a size I grow a lot of. But what intrigued me about it was that this was a super hardy plant. I mean, this thing landed on pure wood chips. I didn't water it, I didn't fertilize it. Nothing was done to this tomato to encourage it to live. And it was a super healthy plant. And I really liked that attribute. And I did save those seeds because I wanted to see if I could get an interesting and stable tomato out of it after a few generations, just specifically because it was so healthy and hardy. There are 2 of those little volunteer tomato seedlings now. And I mean, they don't look super impressive, but that vigor shows up here. This tray is full of tomato seedlings, or I should say an absence of tomato seedlings. I started a wide variety of different tomato types here in these blocks, and the volunteer tomatoes were the only ones that have come up after quite some time. And a lot of the others were seed I just bought this year. And I really was struck by just how well these germinated. I got 2 for 2, 100%, even though they're a couple years old now. And I was really happy with that. So again, I think that vigor is still bearing out, and I'm happy to have it as a trait in the garden. Special call out on the brassicas. This is a harder family because they will cross-pollinate. If you wanted to save seeds from your broccoli or cauliflower or kale or Brussels sprouts, please just alternate your years. So 1 year, save your kale seeds and don't let the others go to flower. The next year, you can do the same with broccoli seeds. The year after that, maybe it's, cauliflower or Brussels sprouts. It's not hard, but you do have to be very intentional about only having one member of that family set flower in a particular year. On the off chance you live near a community garden or you have neighbors that grow vegetables in the brassica family, just bear that in mind. I think they have to be kept like a half mile apart in order to avoid this cross-pollination. The reason they're not the worst, in my opinion, is because I happen to grow a lot of arugula. You can plant arugula right next to kale or broccoli and they will not cross-pollinate one another. That's why I feel fine saving that arugula in the back of the garden that I showed earlier. Be a little cautious with the brassica family, unless it's arugula, in which case, go to town. Last, and I think the trickiest, are the peppers. The pepper family will cross-pollinate. They're all the same species. And this can be fine if you're growing, as an example, just sweet bell types. If they cross-pollinate, probably not a big deal. Similarly, if you were growing Italian frying peppers, another sweet variety, and that was all you were growing, probably fine. I grow the Italian types and bell types, and I'm pretty sure I'd end up with some kind of mutant shapes if I had them cross-pollinate. Might be fine. What I would say is not fine is if you are growing spicy peppers and sweet peppers in the same garden, don't save your seeds. Very, very high chance that they're going to cross-pollinate and you're going to end up with something that is not spicy enough for spicing up your dishes, and it's also too spicy to just eat fresh. Kind of a no bueno pepper. I would strongly suggest if you are growing sweet and spicy types, just don't save your pepper seeds. Last but not least, grocery store. Can you save seeds from produce from the grocery store? You can. Just be very aware the risk there is hybrids. And it's not because hybrids are evil and awful things. Hybrids are great. A lot of commercial varieties are these hybrids, and it's because they have known attributes. As an example, they don't spoil during shipping. These are things that commercial growers will go to great lengths to control and select and cross and produce, save the seed, grow it for commercial markets. But if you were to save the seeds from those plants that you bought at the grocery store, that genetic material in those plants is not, generally speaking, stable. If you plant the seeds from a bell pepper, you might get a bell pepper. You might get something that crossed with a spicy pepper because it was sitting in the field next to spicy peppers. And the people that are selling you these peppers are selling them as the fruit. They did not grow them in a controlled way to keep clean genetic material in the seeds. You have no idea what was growing next to them in that field or what they might have crossed with. Again, you can do it. It's kind of a fun experiment. Just please don't think of it as like your main pepper crop or your main squash or your main cantaloupe. A lot of these are going to be hybrids and most of them will not be genetically stable. The quick exception on these that I do actually save, the first is a named variety in the grocery store. As an example, my grocery store sells Roma tomatoes, labeled as Roma tomatoes. So far, I have had luck that these are in fact true Roma tomatoes and not just Roma type tomatoes. That's a risk, But Roma is an open pollinated variety, and if you buy a tomato that is specifically labeled as a Roma tomato, I at least have had decent luck that they have come back up true to type as a Roma tomato. Another named variety that you will often see in grocery stores are sugar baby watermelons. If you see a watermelon at the grocery store and it is specifically labeled sugar baby, that is an open pollinated variety and you can save the seeds. The last exception I'll give you on that one is a farmer's market. If you are going to a local farmer's market and you have a chance to talk to the vendors, and if they are selling an heirloom type specifically that has been, genetically stable for generations, probably a good chance that you can save those seeds. But do talk to them about where they grew them and what grew next to them. Again, like the grocery store, they're selling it for the fruit. They didn't necessarily grow it in a way to try and keep its pollen separate and its genetics separate, and it could have crossed with something else, meaning the fruit is great, but the seeds inside that fruit possibly are carrying a different set of genetics. But this is the kind of conversation I have found that people at farmers markets tend to love having. They kind of nerd out about the plants, and I think you can talk to them about the provenance of the plant and the crop and the variety and what else it grew with, and they'll probably just answer all your questions. If you find a situation where they're growing an heirloom type and it's the only type of that species that they grew, go for it. You might get a really cool heirloom variety. Hope that was helpful. I hope I haven't turned you off of seed saving. It is fun. You should do it as long as you're doing it carefully. I hope this can help you avoid some of the simple but easy to make mistakes that can happen with seed saving. And I hope I haven't turned you off of seed saving, because it really is fun and you should do it. Even just as a cool experiment, just be aware that that's what you're doing and don't count on it as your main crop. Until next time, thanks.